el aceptó una esclava apache, sin saber que era hija del jefe. His horse trotted steadily, though its hooves left a trail of dust that rose in lazy clouds behind them. The man, whose name was Thomas, was no stranger to hardship. He had grown up on stories of distant lands, of adventure and danger, but nothing had prepared him for the harsh reality of the frontier. He carried with him little more than a few belongings, a sturdy knife, and a heart full of curiosity and caution. The land he traveled was not empty. It was alive with the sounds of nature, the distant calls of birds, the rustle of animals moving through the underbrush, and the faint, almost musical whisper of the wind through the trees. But there was also a tension in the air, one that made him uneasy. He had heard stories of raids and skirmishes, of settlers clashing with native tribes, and he knew that every step he took could bring him closer to danger. Yet he pressed on. Adventure called to him, and he could not resist its pull. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned a brilliant shade of orange, he spotted smoke rising in the distance. Curious and perhaps a little reckless, he rode toward it. The closer he came, the more he noticed signs of a recent conflict. A scorched patch of earth, a broken cart, and the remnants of hurriedly abandoned belongings. It was clear that something significant had happened here, and instinctively he slowed his pace, wary of what he might find. As he approached the clearing, he saw them, a group of people who had clearly suffered. Some were injured, others simply exhausted, and among them was a young girl. She was no more than 16, perhaps younger, with dark hair that fell in waves around her face. Her eyes were wide and alert, reflecting both fear and intelligence. Thomas's heart ached at the sight, though he knew better than to act rashly. He dismounted quietly, keeping his hands visible, showing he meant no harm. The girl was sitting apart from the others, wrapped in a simple cloth, her hands clutching it as if it were a shield against the world. She did not speak, and her eyes seemed to measure him carefully. Thomas, understanding that trust could not be forced, approached slowly and knelt at a respectful distance. He offered her water from his canteen, speaking softly, "It's all right. I'm not here to hurt you." She hesitated but took a small sip, her gaze never leaving his. Over the next few days, Thomas observed her. She moved with a grace and alertness that suggested training and discipline. She knew the forest paths, recognized edible plants, and even tended to the wounded with surprising skill. Her intelligence was evident, though she spoke very little. Thomas began to understand that she was no ordinary girl. There was a strength in her, a resilience born of circumstances he could barely imagine. He learned that she had been captured during a raid. The attackers had been relentless, taking what they wanted without thought of the lives affected. The girl had been given to him, in a manner of speaking, to be cared for, or perhaps simply because there was no one else to claim her. Thomas, despite his surprise and uncertainty, accepted the responsibility. He did not know why fate had placed her in his path, but he felt a sense of duty, a moral obligation he could not ignore. Their days fell into a careful rhythm. Thomas provided food, protection, and guidance, while the girl, whom he began to call Naya, offered her skills quietly, helping with small tasks and demonstrating her knowledge in subtle ways. She taught him how to find water in unexpected places, how to recognize the signs of approaching storms, and how to move silently through the forest. In turn, Thomas shared his own knowledge, teaching her to read maps and to understand the tools and weapons he carried. Evenings were the hardest. The girl would sit by the fire, staring into the flames, and Thomas could sense her mind wandering to faraway places, to memories he could not yet understand. He never pressed her to speak, knowing that trust and understanding could not be rushed. Instead, he would tell stories of his own life, of travels, of lessons learned, of mistakes made, and she would listen, occasionally asking questions, her voice soft but curious. Through these exchanges, a fragile bond began to form, one built on mutual respect and cautious trust. Thomas could not help but wonder about her past. Who were her family? What kind of life had she led before this? There was a sadness in her eyes that spoke of loss, of dreams interrupted, yet there was also a spark, a determination to survive, to understand, to adapt. He admired this about her, though he remained cautious. He knew that appearances could be deceiving, and that even the kindest intentions could be misunderstood in a world so full of danger and conflict. One morning, as the sun rose and painted the world in soft light, Thomas decided they should move on. The clearing, though temporarily safe, was too exposed. There were too many signs that others might return, and he did not wish to place Naya in further danger. Packing their belongings, he prepared to lead them through the forest, relying on both his own knowledge and the guidance she quietly provided. For the first time, he felt that they were a team, not master and servant, not stranger and captive, but two people navigating a dangerous world together, each learning from the other. During their journey, he began to notice other things about her. The way she carried herself, the careful attention she paid to sounds and movement, and the moments when her eyes would flash with understanding far beyond her years. There was something noble about her, a dignity that demanded respect. He could see that she had been raised with care and discipline, and though he did not yet know the full story, he felt certain that her lineage was significant. As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. Naya still did not speak much of her past, and Thomas did not press, but their companionship became a source of strength for both. He felt a growing sense of responsibility, not just for her safety, but for her well-being, her sense of trust in a world that had been unkind. He knew that one day, the truth about her identity would reveal itself, and he hoped that when it did, they would be ready to face it together. And so, in that rugged land, amidst the trees and rivers and endless sky, their story began, not with grand adventures or heroic deeds, but with a simple act of acceptance. Thomas had taken in a girl he did not yet understand, and in doing so, had set into motion a journey that would change both of their lives forever. He did not yet know the secrets she held, the skills she possessed, or the challenges that lay ahead, but he knew one thing with certainty. Their paths were now intertwined, and together they would face whatever the frontier had in store. The forest seemed to watch them as they moved, the wind carrying whispers through the branches, as if telling stories of what was to come. Thomas felt a mixture of apprehension and excitement, a knowledge that life was unpredictable, and that the future, though uncertain, held promise. And Naya, quiet but observant, walked beside him, her mind alive with thoughts and memories she had yet to share, her spirit strong despite the trials she had endured. In that moment, the world seemed vast and full of possibility. Two souls, brought together by circumstance, moving forward into the unknown. The first part of their journey had ended, but the story was only beginning. And as the sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the landscape, both Thomas and Naya felt the unspoken truth that they were no longer alone. Each had found a companion in the other, and together they would face the challenges that lay ahead, one step at a time. The days that followed were filled with a quiet rhythm. Thomas and Naya traveled through the vast wilderness, moving carefully along narrow trails and hidden paths that only those familiar with the land could truly navigate. Each morning, Thomas would rise with the sun, stretching his tired muscles and preparing their meager breakfast of dried meat and water. Naya, meanwhile, would silently gather herbs, fruits, or edible plants, always alert to the subtle signs of nature, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, or the tracks of animals that passed during the night. Thomas often marveled at her knowledge. Even in the most ordinary moments, her instincts and skills were remarkable. She could sense the coming of rain long before the clouds appeared, find clean water in places he would have overlooked, and even spot tracks that seemed invisible to his eyes. It became clear that she was more than just a survivor. She was someone who understood the land in a way that seemed almost instinctual. Every day, Thomas learned a little more from her, and every day he began to feel a growing respect for her courage and wisdom. Despite the necessity of travel and survival, they found moments to speak. Thomas would tell her stories of distant cities, of people and places he had seen in his youth, of adventures both grand and small. Naya listened with quiet curiosity, occasionally asking questions that revealed a keen mind and a natural curiosity about the world beyond her forest home. Her questions were never simple. They often required thought and reflection, and Thomas found himself thinking more carefully about the answers, impressed by her intelligence. Yet there was a barrier between them, not one of distrust but of unspoken history. Thomas could see that Naya carried a weight with her, a shadow of experiences and memories she had not shared. Her eyes would sometimes drift toward the horizon, distant and thoughtful, as though recalling a life left behind. He never pressed her to speak of it. He had learned that trust was built slowly, with patience and respect, and that rushing it could break the fragile connection they were forming. One afternoon, as they rested beside a sparkling stream, Thomas watched Naya closely. She knelt by the water, her reflection mingling with the gentle ripples. Her movements were deliberate and graceful, showing a balance between caution and confidence. She washed her hands, then picked a few leaves from nearby plants, carefully inspecting them before adding them to a small bundle. Thomas asked, "What are you gathering?" "These are for healing," she replied softly without looking up. "They can help with pain, cuts, or fever. The land gives everything we need if we pay attention." Thomas nodded, impressed. He had known some remedies from his travels, but her knowledge was far deeper, practical, and precise. It was clear that she had been taught well, and by someone who cared enough to pass on the knowledge carefully. In that moment, he realized that her abilities were not just survival skills. They were part of her identity, a reflection of a culture and family that he could barely understand. As the journey continued, they faced challenges that tested their growing partnership. One morning, while moving through a dense forest, they stumbled upon a small band of wild animals, a family of wolves. The creatures watched them silently from a distance, their eyes alert and cautious. Thomas's instinct was to act quickly to scare them away, but Naya held up her hand and whispered for him to wait. "She is testing us," she explained softly. "They are curious, not dangerous. Respect them, and they may let us pass." Thomas obeyed, though every nerve in his body was tense. He watched as Naya moved calmly and deliberately, mimicking the natural sounds of the forest, letting the animals see that they meant no harm. Slowly, the wolves relaxed and eventually disappeared into the trees. Thomas felt a mixture of awe and relief. Her understanding of the world around them was astonishing, and he began to trust her instincts in ways he had never imagined possible. At night, when they made camp, Thomas would build a fire while Naya prepared simple but effective meals, often using plants and herbs he would have ignored. They spoke little in these moments, but their silence was comfortable, filled with a shared sense of survival and mutual respect. Occasionally, Thomas would glance at her, noting the way her eyes reflected the firelight, the quiet determination in her expression. He realized that he had begun to depend on her not just for survival, but for guidance, and that he had started to care for her well-being more deeply than he had expected. However, their companionship was not without tension. Thomas was aware that the land they traveled through was not entirely safe, and that any mistake could bring danger. Naya, for her part, was fiercely independent and did not always accept his decisions. There were moments of disagreement, paths to take, risks to face, or methods of handling obstacles. Yet even in disagreement there was respect. They learned to listen to one another, to weigh each other's knowledge, and to make decisions together. Slowly their bond deepened, built on trust, experience, and the shared challenge of navigating a world that was often unforgiving. One day, they came across the ruins of an abandoned settlement. Smoke curled faintly from a distant chimney, suggesting that someone had recently passed through. Thomas felt a chill. The frontier was unpredictable, and there were always those who might see travelers as targets or opportunities. He instinctively prepared for defense, but Naya moved calmly, scanning the surroundings with sharp, alert eyes. "They are gone," she said after a moment, her voice steady. "But we must be careful. Some paths lead to danger, some to safety. We must choose wisely." Thomas felt a renewed admiration for her wisdom. She was cautious without being fearful, strong without being reckless. Her guidance had saved them more than once, and he knew that her presence was essential to their survival. Yet he still did not know the full extent of her abilities, nor the true story of who she was and where she came from. He sensed that there was more to her than she had revealed, and a quiet curiosity began to grow within him. As they moved on from the settlement, Thomas began to reflect on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. He had expected the journey to be lonely, filled only with the challenges of nature and survival, but instead, he had found a companion, a guide, and perhaps something more. He realized that their partnership was unique, a merging of experiences and perspectives that neither of them could have anticipated. Naya, for her part, observed Thomas with quiet interest. She had been cautious at first, uncertain of his intentions and abilities, but she had come to recognize his integrity, his courage, and his willingness to learn. He had made mistakes, yes, but he had also shown care, respect, and a genuine desire to understand. For the first time in a long while, she felt a measure of trust, not complete, but enough to allow a connection to grow, delicate and tentative, yet meaningful. Days turned into weeks, and their journey became a series of small victories and challenges. They crossed rivers, climbed hills, and navigated forests that seemed endless. They faced storms, scarcity, and the constant threat of others who might harm them. Through it all, they relied on one another, learning to read the land together, to anticipate danger, and to share the small joys that life offered even in hardship. One evening, as they rested beneath a canopy of stars, Thomas looked at Naya and realized something important. He no longer saw her simply as someone he had rescued. She was a teacher, a companion, and perhaps the key to understanding a world that he had only glimpsed from the edges. He did not know her full story, nor did he yet understand the significance of her lineage, but he felt certain that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. And Naya, quietly tending the fire and preparing a simple meal, felt a similar certainty. Though she had been wary at first, she had come to recognize Thomas's character, his determination, and his respect for her skills and decisions. She had been given no choice in their meeting, but she had found in him a companion she could rely on, someone who would not underestimate her or dismiss her knowledge. In that moment, under the vast, starlit sky, a bond had formed, subtle, unspoken, but unbreakable. Thus, life on the frontier continued. Each day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new understanding. They were no longer simply a man and a girl traveling together. They were partners, learning from each other, growing together, and discovering the strength that comes from mutual respect and trust. And though neither of them yet knew the full story that awaited, the truths of her past, the secrets of her identity, they had begun a journey that would shape them both forever. In this way, the second part of their story unfolded, not with dramatic battles or heroic feats, but with quiet discovery, shared survival, and the deepening connection between two people brought together by fate, circumstance, and the unpredictable paths of the wilderness. As the days turned into weeks, Thomas and Naya had grown closer, yet the mysteries surrounding her remained. Naya moved with a quiet confidence, guiding them safely through the forests, across rivers, and around hidden dangers. Her skills had become indispensable, and Thomas often marveled at her ability to anticipate challenges before they even appeared. Yet, despite her guidance and remarkable abilities, she remained reserved about her past. One morning, the sun was barely peeking over the hills when they reached the edge of a wide valley. The land stretched out before them, dotted with clusters of trees, small streams, and tall grasses that swayed gently in the wind. It was a place of calm beauty, but also of hidden danger. Thomas dismounted and surveyed the area, sensing the usual tension that accompanied the unknown. Naya stood beside him, her dark eyes scanning the horizon, alert to the smallest sign of movement. "They watch us," she said softly, almost to herself. Thomas followed her gaze and noticed the faint shadows among the trees. They were distant, but they moved with purpose. "We should be careful," she added, her voice steady, revealing no fear but a careful awareness. Thomas nodded, trusting her instincts. Together, they moved slowly and quietly, careful not to disturb the tall grasses or alert whoever, or whatever, was watching. It was during moments like this that he saw how different Naya truly was. She had a way of blending with the surroundings, of moving without sound, and of reading signs in nature that he would have overlooked completely. He realized that her abilities were far beyond what he had imagined. Later that day, as they rested near a small stream, Thomas noticed Naya watching him with a different expression than usual. There was intensity in her eyes, a focus that seemed almost urgent. He asked, "What is it?" "I think someone is looking for us," she said. "Not strangers. People who know me, people from my past." Thomas felt a shiver run down his spine. He had always known that there might be consequences to her presence with him, but hearing it confirmed brought a new weight. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. Naya hesitated, then spoke in a quiet, deliberate voice. "I am not just a girl lost in the forest. I was raised in a place of importance. My father is a leader, a chief of my people. They may be searching for me, and when they find us, they will expect answers." Thomas felt a rush of surprise and concern. He had suspected that there was more to her than she had shared, but he had never imagined that she was the daughter of a chief. The revelation changed everything. It explained her knowledge, her skill, and the confidence she carried in the forest. But it also brought a new danger. The consequences of being found could be severe, both for her and for him. "We will face this together," Thomas said firmly. "You are not alone in this." Naya gave him a faint nod but did not speak further. She returned to tending the stream, her hands moving with the same quiet precision, but Thomas could sense that her mind was far away, thinking of the people she had left behind and what would happen when they found her. That evening, as they made camp beneath the canopy of trees, Thomas noticed that Naya was restless. She moved about, arranging the firewood, checking the perimeter, and occasionally glancing toward the horizon. He understood that she was anticipating someone, perhaps her people, perhaps others who could pose a threat. Despite the tension, she did not show fear. She moved with calmness and discipline, revealing a strength that left Thomas in awe. In the days that followed, small signs appeared that someone was indeed watching them. Tracks in the soft soil, broken branches, and distant shadows all indicated that they were being followed. Naya would point them out to Thomas without speaking much, her eyes sharp and alert. He began to rely on her observations, realizing that her experience and training were unmatched. She had been prepared for situations like this, even if he had not been. One afternoon, as they crossed a shallow river, a group of riders appeared on the distant ridge. Naya froze, her body tense, and whispered, "They are coming. They know I am here." Thomas's heart raced. He had expected dangers in the wilderness, but this was different. These were not wild animals or random travelers. They were people who had a connection to Naya, and their intentions were unknown. He glanced at her, searching for guidance. "Stay calm," she said quietly. "We must not show fear. We can meet them with respect and honesty, or we risk angering them." Her words were measured and wise, and Thomas followed her lead. As they approached the riders, Naya stepped forward, her posture confident and dignified. The riders slowed, recognizing her presence. One of them, a tall man with a stern face, dismounted and approached, his expression a mixture of relief and caution. "Naya," he said, "we have been searching for you." She met his gaze calmly. "I know," she replied. "And I have found someone who has treated me with respect and care. He has helped me survive, and I owe him my trust." Thomas stepped forward, unsure of how he would be received. The man looked at him critically, but Naya spoke on his behalf. "He is honest. He is brave. He has kept me safe." There was a pause, a silent moment of judgment. Then the leader nodded slightly, acknowledging Thomas's role. "Very well," he said. "You have proven yourself, but we must go back. The chief needs to see you." Thomas felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The confrontation had been avoided for now, but he knew that meeting her father would be another challenge entirely. Naya, however, remained composed. She moved with a quiet authority, guiding Thomas alongside her, preparing him for the meeting that lay ahead. As they traveled together toward the chief's village, Thomas observed Naya closely. He saw the subtle ways she interacted with the riders, the respect in their eyes when she spoke, and the calm confidence in her movements. He realized that she was not only skilled in survival, but also in diplomacy and leadership. Every step revealed more about her character and her upbringing, and he felt both admiration and awe. When they finally arrived at the village, Thomas was struck by its order and structure. The people moved with purpose, their eyes sharp and alert, yet there was a warmth in the way they treated one another. Naya led him through the village with confidence, and he began to understand the depth of her influence and the respect she commanded. Finally, they reached the chief's dwelling, a structure both grand and humble, reflecting the balance of authority and community. Naya paused at the entrance, turned to Thomas and said, "Stay close. Speak with honesty and respect. That is all you need." Thomas nodded, feeling a mixture of nerves and determination. Together, they entered the dwelling, and he was immediately struck by the presence of the chief, a tall man with a strong, dignified face and eyes that seemed to see everything. He regarded Thomas carefully, then looked at Naya, and a subtle smile appeared on his lips. "Naya," the chief said, his voice deep and commanding, "you have returned safely, and you have brought someone with you." Naya stepped forward and spoke clearly, introducing Thomas and explaining his role in protecting her and guiding her through the wilderness. The chief listened carefully, his expression thoughtful, then nodded slowly. "You have acted with courage and honesty," he said to Thomas. "That is all that matters. We will speak further, but know this, you have earned our respect." Relief washed over Thomas. The tension that had been building for days eased, replaced by a cautious optimism. He realized that while their journey was far from over, they had faced the first challenge together and had emerged stronger. Naya, standing beside him, radiated a quiet strength and assurance, and Thomas felt a profound respect for her, not just as a companion, but as someone whose past and future were intertwined with his own. That evening, as they settled into the village, Thomas observed the community around him. He saw the bond between the people, the traditions they upheld, and the respect they showed for one another. He understood that Naya's past, though complex and powerful, was also a source of wisdom and guidance that would shape their journey ahead. And Naya, for her part, seemed at peace, having navigated the first confrontation with skill and dignity. In the quiet moments before sleep, Thomas reflected on the events of the past days. He realized that Naya was more than a guide or companion. She was a teacher, showing him the value of patience, respect, and understanding. He also recognized that the revelation of her identity was not the end of their journey, but a turning point that would shape the challenges to come. Together, they had faced the unknown, confronted the shadows of her past, and emerged with trust and respect stronger than before. And though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, learning from one another, supporting each other, and navigating the world with courage and wisdom. The journey continued, but now, with a new understanding, a new awareness, and a growing bond that neither time nor challenge could easily break. The story of Thomas and Naya had reached a critical turning point, one that would define their paths and shape the adventures yet to come. The morning sun broke gently over the horizon, painting the village with shades of gold and amber. Thomas woke early, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Today was not just another day of travel or survival, it was a day of trial, a test he did not fully understand yet, one that would determine his place among Naya's people and perhaps his future alongside her. He rose quietly, careful not to wake Naya, who was already moving with her usual calm confidence. She had prepared a simple breakfast for them, consisting of dried fruits, bread, and herbs she had gathered from the nearby forest. Thomas sat beside her, feeling the weight of the chief's presence lingering in his thoughts. Though the chief had welcomed them and acknowledged Thomas's honesty, there was an unspoken expectation. He would have to prove himself, demonstrate his courage, respect, and understanding of their customs. Thomas had never faced anything like this before. He was accustomed to challenges in the wilderness, but this was different. Here, failure could carry consequences far more serious than a mistake in the forest. After breakfast, Naya approached him quietly. "The chief wishes to speak with you," she said softly. Her dark eyes were calm, but there was a subtle firmness in her voice that reminded Thomas to remain composed. "Be honest, speak with respect. That is all you need to do." Thomas nodded, swallowing the nervous lump in his throat. He followed Naya as she led him to the chief's dwelling. The villagers paused in their daily tasks to watch them pass, their eyes assessing, curious but respectful. Thomas felt their gaze, and a sense of responsibility settled over him. He knew he could not falter, not now, not when trust had been placed in his hands. Inside the chief's dwelling, the atmosphere was solemn. The air was filled with the faint scent of herbs and fire, and the walls were decorated with symbols of their culture, carvings, woven fabrics, and items that told stories of generations past. The chief sat upon a raised platform, his posture regal, yet welcoming. Naya stepped aside, allowing Thomas to approach, and he bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect he hoped would be understood. "You have traveled far," the chief began, his voice deep and commanding. "You have protected my daughter and guided her safely through the wilderness. That is commendable, but your actions will be judged not only by courage but by respect for our ways." Thomas met his gaze steadily. "I understand, Chief," he said. "I do not wish to disrespect your people. I only wish to help and to honor the trust Naya has placed in me." The chief studied him carefully, as if searching for any sign of dishonesty or weakness. Then, after a long pause, he spoke again. "Words are easy, actions are harder. You will face challenges that test your character. You will follow our customs, learn our ways, and demonstrate your worth. Only then will you earn the trust of this village." Thomas nodded, feeling both nervous and determined. He had faced physical challenges before, but this was different. Here, he had to prove himself in a world he did not fully understand, guided by customs, traditions, and expectations that were unfamiliar. And yet, he felt ready, or at least willing, to try. The first challenge was not physical, but a test of understanding. Thomas was asked to observe the village, to learn how the people worked together, how they respected each other, and how they lived in harmony with nature. He spent the day alongside villagers, helping to gather food, repair homes, and tend to animals. At first, he stumbled, unfamiliar with their methods and tools, but Naya's presence beside him provided guidance. She explained the significance of each task, the meaning behind the gestures, and the respect owed to the people and the land. Through these simple acts, Thomas began to understand the depth of their culture. It was not merely survival, it was a philosophy, a way of life that balanced strength with compassion, courage with respect. Every task held meaning, every interaction was important, and every moment was an opportunity to demonstrate integrity. By the end of the day, Thomas felt a sense of accomplishment. He had learned more in a single day than he had anticipated, and he could see the chief observing him from a distance, noting his efforts. The next day brought a different kind of challenge, a test of courage. The chief led Thomas and a group of villagers to the edge of a dense forest, where a wild river flowed rapidly over rocks. Thomas was instructed to cross the river and retrieve a bundle of herbs from the opposite bank, herbs essential for the village's medicine and healing. It seemed simple, but the river was swift, the rocks slippery, and failure could have serious consequences. Thomas hesitated for a moment, assessing the river. He glanced at Naya, who smiled encouragingly, her eyes filled with quiet confidence. "You can do this," she whispered. "Trust yourself and move carefully." He took a deep breath and stepped into the river. The current was strong, tugging at his legs, but he focused on each step, moving with caution and determination. When he stumbled on a slippery rock, Naya called out instructions, guiding him safely. With each careful movement, he gained confidence, and eventually he reached the opposite bank and collected the herbs. The villagers watching nodded in approval, and Thomas felt a surge of pride. He had faced fear, acted with patience, and succeeded. Over the next several days, Thomas faced more challenges. He learned to track animals with precision, to hunt responsibly, to respect the rhythms of the land, and to observe the subtle cues in nature that the villagers relied upon daily. Each task tested not only his physical skills, but his patience, humility, and willingness to learn. Naya remained by his side, offering guidance without judgment, supporting him in moments of doubt, and quietly celebrating each success. One evening, after a long day of tasks and lessons, Thomas and Naya sat by a fire outside the chief's dwelling. The sky was a tapestry of stars, and the air was cool and fragrant with the scent of herbs and wood smoke. Thomas felt a deep sense of reflection. He realized that the challenges had not only tested his abilities but had changed him. He was no longer the same traveler who had wandered into the wilderness weeks ago. He had learned humility, patience, and the importance of respect and understanding in a world so different from his own. "Naya," he said softly, "I never imagined that learning about your people would be so life-changing. I understand now why they respect you, why they honor your family, and why these lessons are so important. I feel different." Naya looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "You have done well," she said quietly. "Not because of strength or skill alone, but because you have shown respect and a willingness to learn. That is what matters most." The next challenge came in a different form, a test of character. A dispute arose in the village between two families over resources. Thomas observed from a distance, unsure of his role. Naya whispered instructions, guiding him to act with fairness, to listen carefully, and to offer solutions without taking sides. Thomas approached the families, using the lessons he had learned from Naya and the chief. He mediated the discussion with patience, honesty, and respect, helping them reach a solution that honored both families and preserved harmony in the village. The chief observed silently, and when the matter was resolved, he nodded in approval. Thomas felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The test had not been about strength, speed, or survival skills. It had been about judgment, integrity, and the ability to act with wisdom and fairness. He realized that these qualities were at the heart of the culture he was learning to understand. Over time, Thomas's efforts began to gain recognition not just from the chief, but from the villagers themselves. They saw his willingness to learn, his respect for their customs, and his genuine care for Naya and the community. He had earned their trust through actions, patience, and humility. Naya, too, seemed pleased, her eyes reflecting pride in both her father's approval and Thomas's growth. By the end of the month, Thomas had transformed. He was no longer an outsider merely tolerated. He had become a valued member of the village community. The chief had spoken to him directly, acknowledging his courage, integrity, and respect for their ways. "You have proven yourself," the chief said. "You understand our values and you have earned the trust of our people. That is not an easy task for a stranger. You honor our family and our traditions." Thomas bowed his head in gratitude, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. He had faced trials, learned lessons, and earned respect, not through force, but through patience, understanding, and courage. And through it all, Naya had been his guide, teacher, and companion. Their bond, forged in the wilderness and tested through challenges, had grown stronger, deeper, and more resilient. That night, as Thomas lay under the stars, he reflected on all that had happened. He realized that the greatest challenges were not always physical, nor the greatest victories measured in skill or strength. True courage, he understood, was in humility, respect, and the willingness to learn from others. And he knew, without a doubt, that whatever trials lay ahead, he was ready to face them, with Naya by his side. The fourth part of their journey had tested him, shaped him, and prepared him for the future. He had faced the expectations of a community rich in tradition and wisdom, and he had proven himself worthy not through dominance, but through respect, patience, and courage. The path ahead remained uncertain, but he now walked it with a new confidence, grounded in lessons learned and bonds forged in trust and understanding. The morning air was crisp and clear as Thomas, and Naya awoke to another day in the village. Over the past weeks, they had faced countless challenges, and Thomas had earned the respect of Naya's people, including her father, the chief. Yet, a sense of anticipation lingered in the air. Today would not be a test of skill or courage, but a day of reconciliation and understanding, a time to solidify the trust and bonds that had been formed. Thomas rose early, stretching his tired muscles. He looked at Naya, who was quietly tending to the fire, her movements calm and deliberate. Despite everything they had faced, there was a peacefulness about her now, a quiet confidence that reassured him. She looked up at him, her dark eyes reflecting warmth and strength. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Thomas nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." They walked together toward the central area of the village where the villagers had gathered. There was a quiet energy among the people, curiosity, respect, and a sense of anticipation. They had watched Thomas learn, work, and grow, and now they awaited the moment when the bonds between him, Naya, and the community would be formally acknowledged. The chief stood at the center, flanked by elders and respected members of the village. He looked at Thomas with a steady, thoughtful gaze, then at Naya, whose presence seemed to command a natural respect. Thomas felt a mixture of nerves and determination. He knew this was not just about him. It was about understanding, trust, and the future of his relationship with Naya and her people. The chief began to speak, his voice deep and measured. "Thomas, you have traveled far and faced many challenges. You have shown courage, patience, and respect for our customs. You have protected my daughter and helped her navigate a world filled with dangers. Your actions have earned the trust of this village." Thomas felt a swell of gratitude, but he bowed his head respectfully, acknowledging that the honor was as much about learning and understanding as it was about any accomplishment. "Thank you, Chief," he said sincerely. "I could not have done any of this without Naya's guidance and support. She has taught me more than I could have imagined." The chief nodded, his expression softening. "Naya, you have chosen well. You have shown wisdom in guiding him, patience in teaching him, and courage in facing the unknown. Your strength is evident, and your heart is true." Naya stepped forward, her posture poised and confident. "I have learned much from him as well," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the gathered villagers. "He has listened, learned, and acted with respect. He has shown care not just for me, but for this community and our way of life. That is why I trust him." The villagers murmured their approval, their expressions reflecting both relief and admiration. Thomas realized that trust and respect were not simply granted, they were earned through understanding, humility, and action. And in that moment, he understood the depth of the bond he shared with Nea, a bond forged through trials, shared experiences, and mutual respect. The chief motioned for Thomas to stand beside him. "Thomas," he said, "you are now considered a friend of this village. Your actions have proven that you are worthy of trust and honor. Nea's life is important to us, and through her, you have become part of our story. We welcome you, not just as a traveler or protector, but as someone who has earned our respect and friendship." Thomas felt a wave of relief and gratitude wash over him. He had faced countless challenges, learned unfamiliar customs, and grown in ways he could never have imagined. And now, he was not only accepted but valued. He looked at Nea, and she gave him a small, reassuring smile. In that smile, he saw pride, trust, and a shared understanding of everything they had endured together. In the days that followed, Thomas continued to integrate into village life. He helped with tasks, learned new skills, and contributed where he could. Yet he also observed and absorbed, understanding the wisdom and traditions that guided the community. Nea remained his guide and companion, but now their relationship had grown deeper. It was built not on necessity or survival alone, but on trust, mutual respect, and a shared journey of growth. One morning, as they walked along a river that sparkled in the sunlight, Thomas reflected on their journey. "I never imagined my travels would lead me here," he said quietly, speaking more to himself than to Nea. "I thought this land would be just a challenge to overcome, but it has become a place of learning, friendship, and understanding. And most importantly, it has brought us together." Nea looked at him, her dark eyes thoughtful. "Life is full of surprises," she said softly. "Sometimes what we think is the beginning is only the middle. What matters is how we move forward together with respect and trust." Thomas nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He realized that the journey had been about much more than survival. It had been about understanding, empathy, and connection. Through every challenge, every trial, and every moment of uncertainty, they had learned to rely on one another, to respect one another, and to grow together. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sharing stories and laughter with the villagers. Thomas had learned to listen as much as he spoke, understanding that knowledge and wisdom were found in observation and attention. Nea had taught him not only the ways of the land, but also the values that guided her people: respect, patience, courage, and understanding. Together, they had built a bridge between their worlds, one small step at a time. As the weeks passed, the village itself began to flourish. With Thomas's help, they improved water access, strengthened homes, and developed new strategies for tending crops and resources. He was careful not to impose, instead offering assistance and learning from the villagers' methods. The people responded with warmth and appreciation, recognizing his genuine effort to contribute and his respect for their customs. Nea watched Thomas with pride and quiet satisfaction. She had seen his growth firsthand, and she knew that his character had been tested and proven. He had not only survived the challenges of the wilderness but had embraced the lessons of her culture, earning respect not through force or dominance, but through humility, learning, and courage. One afternoon, the chief called Thomas and Nea to his dwelling once more. "You have both done well," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "Through your journey, you have strengthened the bonds of trust, understanding, and respect. Your partnership is a lesson for all of us, proof that courage, humility, and honesty can bridge even the widest gaps." Thomas bowed respectfully, humbled by the chief's words. "Thank you, Chief," he said. "I could not have done any of this alone. Nea guided me, taught me, and trusted me. That trust was everything." Nea smiled softly, stepping forward. "And he listened," she said simply. "He learned, and together we have found strength we could not have had alone." The chief nodded approvingly, a rare smile crossing his face. Then let this be a new beginning, not only for you two, but for all who witness the value of trust, respect, and unity. May your journey together continue to inspire and guide. In the days that followed, Thomas and Naya continued their lives in the village, not as strangers, nor merely as companions, but as equals, partners, and friends. They learned from one another, supported one another, and shared in the joys and challenges of daily life. The hardships of the past weeks had forged a bond that was strong and enduring, one built on respect, understanding, and shared experience. Thomas often reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had come seeking adventure, expecting challenges, but he had found something far more valuable: connection, wisdom, and a sense of belonging. Naya, too, reflected on the journey, recognizing the growth in both of them and the potential for their future together. One grounded not in fear or uncertainty, but in trust, respect, and shared purpose. And so, life continued. The village thrived. Thomas became a respected member of the community, and Naya's guidance and strength helped shape not only their own journey, but the lives of those around them. Together, they had faced the unknown, navigated danger, and earned the trust of a community that valued integrity, courage, and understanding. As the sun set each evening, casting warm hues across the village, Thomas and Naya would sit together by the fire, sharing quiet moments of reflection. They had learned that true strength was found not only in survival, but in trust, respect, and the bonds formed through shared experience. And in the glow of the firelight, they felt a deep sense of peace and hope, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Their journey had begun with uncertainty and challenge, but it had ended with understanding, friendship, and the promise of a future built on trust, courage, and mutual respect. In each other, they had found not just a companion, but a partner for life, a guide for the heart, and a reminder that even in the most unexpected circumstances, connection and empathy could transform lives. And so, Thomas and Naya continued forward, not just surviving but thriving, together, in a world that had once seemed so vast and unknown, now full of possibility, understanding, and hope.